reporters. Basically, there's only two ways you can report on prisons. One is you ask the State Department of Corrections or the City Department of Corrections for access to a jail or prison. If you do that, you get minded the whole time. You go in and you're sitting in a room and there's a public affairs person, usually more than one, and there's usually maybe a high-ranking commissioner or superintendent. And probably most frightening to the inmate is there are correction officers. So the idea of an inmate being able to talk to you, a New York Times reporter, about brutality when there's a correction officer in the room is just not going to happen, too scared. So how did we do it? We went in as visitors. That's the simple answer. You can go, pretty much anyone can go in as a visitor in a New York State prison or in the New York City jail, Rikers. And we would sometimes have leads. We would speak to attorneys, plaintiffs' attorneys, who would say, this is a terrible case, and you got to go speak to John Smith up at Great Meadows. Now, sometimes in the beginning, we would write John Smith a letter, but a lot of times those letters didn't get through. By the time you try to write John Smith and John Smith tries to write you back, it can be months and months. So you're a daily reporter, So we would just go up cold. We would take these trips upstate. I did it with Mike Schwartz, who's my reporting partner, the two of us. It's a lot of resources for the New York Times. I mean, they gave us months and months and months to do these stories. And we would go from prison to prison and request to see various inmates cold. And they would come out and they had no idea why we were there. And we would start telling them that we understood that you had your glasses on one day and you had a letter permitting you to wear these glasses, and they were knocked off your face and stomped by a correction officer, and they ripped up your permit, and they'd look at us and say, my God, how do you know that? These are people who are buried away. They've long given up the idea that anyone understands them, has any idea of what they go to. And these two newspaper reporters from the New York Times show up and start asking these questions. Now, the last piece of this, and keep in mind, prisons, jails, they're public institutions. You pay for these places to be run. There should be, in the same way there's a methodology for getting into for a lawyer getting into a prison, there should be a methodology for a newspaper reporter. So we would do these interviews. You're not allowed as a visitor to have pen and paper. So you sit there, and literally when we were done, Mike and I would run out to the parking lot to our cars and just write down everything we could remember. Right? That's how we reported on prisons. It's the New York Times. It's a public prison. I mean, it's crazy.